Hi everyone and welcome to the first lesson of programming for entrepreneurs. First of all, what is this course about? This course aims to give to people who have in their mind one idea, and that is to start a business, not to learn programming, not to do some geeky shit, not to masturbate with some fucking framework, but just simply to get the tech side of their startup under control. That's who these lessons are aimed for. There's a lot of programming material out there, but it's all geared towards people who want to be professional programmers and who just need to do that one thing in their life. But as an entrepreneur, you need to do a million different things. So you need to get up to speed real fast, real quick, just like a kid who's got some bullies and he needs to learn karate in a week. Can't go the normal way from white belt to black belt. So I need to teach you the crane move. So the first thing to keep in mind throughout this, and just last bit of intro here is that this first lesson is a very, very general overview for people who know absolutely nothing about the technology side of starting a business, including apps, the web, this and that. Just basic intro. So we're not going to do any programming today. And if that's what you're looking for, maybe you can skip to other lessons. But for today, what I want to cover all sort of stems from this general principle that since you're a newcomer in a small company, speed is your only advantage. So other companies can do things massively, but because of that, they're slow. How long does it take Facebook to test a new feature? You know, they get billions on the line, and so they can just say, oh, let me change an icon there. Really? Where are you going to put the icon? How is the icon going to get downloaded by billions of people? How many content distribution network nodes have you got? How is that going to break the phone app, which has some kind of limit, or maybe they hard-coded some server location where it's downloading all the icons? It's very hard to make changes to something that's already up when you've got tons of clients. But you're small, you don't have any clients, and here that's a luck, because you can be fast. In Greece, I think there are documented instances of great battles fought between, I don't know if it was the Phoenicians. I really didn't pay attention during history lesson, as you can very easily notice from when I make historical allusions. But examples of battles that were won against a bigger fleet just because the bigger fleet has had ships that were bigger and therefore less maneuverable. So as a small company, you need to use this advantage of maneuverability to your advantage to the extreme, because it's the only thing you've got. Now, to use speed, you need to figure out, or actually keep in mind a few things. To retain your ability to use this speed, you need to be able to make changes to your technology very, very fast, in a matter of days. Hours is better. The reason I even mention hours is because sometimes things just don't work. And you will find yourself in critical turn points where you've just, your hard-earned mailing list, not a shit mailing list you buy from somewhere and that gets you flagged as spam and blacklisted immediately, but your real mailing list of people who are, let's say, eager to know about your progress on Kickstarter, let's say, and you just mailed all of them, and then you realize, because one, let's say in the middle of the night, this guy wakes up, so he's the first to go to your site, and he says, hey, but actually, I tried to log in, it doesn't work. Okay, how long before you can fix that shit? That's a key consideration. So you need to be able to make changes lickety-split. Now, related to that is, how hard is it to find someone to make those changes? When you begin, you probably cannot afford paying salaries, and so you're going to have to find some freelancers or outsource your technology, which I'm going to cover in a minute. It's a very risky proposition. But normally you pay them to do a chunk of the job and then it's finished. And then if you want them to do the rest, then it's a different project altogether. So that has to be negotiated, and there might be vacations. But even more important is the fact that if you need to make any more changes, probably that's because they did a shit job. There's no doubt in my mind that if you go out and get something created by somebody that you don't know, who is not you, you're going to end up with 98% shit jobs. I'll come to this later. So once you get a shit job and you need to fix it, you surely don't want to use the same guys who made the shit job to begin with, because then you're a masochist. So you're going to have to find somebody else. And the problem there is that geeks, that is people who do this for a living, including myself for a long time, so I'm not putting anybody down, but that's just the way the mentality works. People who program for a living, they do it normally because they really like it. They don't do it because they decide to punish themselves by not having access to other people. But anyway, they really like to use new, cool platforms. And so if you just look online, you will find a barrage of bullshit. And you will pull out your hair and you will think, oh my God, where should I start? What is Angular? What is JavaScript? Most likely you don't know the difference between JavaScript and Java, entirely different things. And there's C# and there's C++ and there's C and there's assembly and there's PHP and there's Ruby on Rails. And every geek that you talk to, they divide into factions according to their very dear tribal instincts, just like any other facet of society. So just like there are the PC guys and the Mac guys, you're going to find the PHP guys and the Ruby guys and some other people. So if you have no background whatsoever in technology, it's going to be really, really hard to make sense of this. And that's why I decided to create this course to get rid of all the bullshit, because you can literally take 99.999% of everything you find on the internet about how to make your app, how to make your code, and take it, put it in the toilet, flush, and just forget it even exists. Let me see now, how should I proceed? So this is good, right? You don't need to learn everything. But the problem is that geeks really want you to use this new thing just because they want to use it, and they want to get paid to learn it. So many times the stuff that they're pushing to you, saying, oh, you got to do this is new, this is cool, that is the stuff that they can't even do well yet because it's new. So one thing to keep in mind is that there is no new is cool in technology. This web technology has been around for many, many years, and there's a tremendous amount of inertia towards changing it. Just think of Flash, this antique technology which is still around. Just think of HTML, CSS. These are things that were born in the early days of the internet, and they get changed, they get improved very slowly, but they don't get substituted with something else, because the advantage of the internet and any app that you create today really has something to do with the internet, even if it's running locally, at least some login, some validation check or something. For some reason, you're going to want it to connect to a central server in some way, so using the internet. But the internet's value is that it's interoperable. And so it would be a very stupid thing if the technology underlying it were to change every few months, because then everything would be incompatible with everything else. So basically, HTML, CSS, people still use those. JavaScript, extremely poorly suited language for developing actual applications. Just the name script tells you that it's not supposed to be able to create complex programs. Initially was known as ECMA script, and they just renamed it, but it's got nothing to do with Java. So anyway, not to get lost in detail, but new is not cool. You need to use something that preserves your competitive advantage, which is speed. So you want something that anybody on the street can do. You want to use a technology where if you were to find somebody to fix the shit that they just did from India, that then you would have 10 people to choose from instead of 2, okay? Now, there's a huge temptation, and that is the temptation to use frameworks. frameworks belong to all different levels. There's high-level frameworks such as CMSs, content management systems. These are a poor man's website that you can just click a few buttons and you can have something online. And there are low-level frameworks, for example, jQuery, which take whatever language they start from, say in this case JavaScript, and add some functionality to it. And then they save some time, but under some conditions, and so we'll get to it. But again, less people can use a framework than can code in a language. And so by choosing a framework, if you don't have a really good reason to use a framework, the benefit has to be clear, because the negative side is very, very clear, that you're going to limit the pool of people that can help you out. If you're looking for a co-founder, or if you yourself have technical skills and you were to be mad enough to go and create an app or a platform in something that you're not familiar with, thus shedding that little amount of safety that you had by at least knowing one technology, that'd be foolish. The other thing is high-level frameworks such as WordPress, for example, can and will be hacked, because there are billions of sites out there made with the same technology. So the incentive for a hacker to hack into those is enormous, because if you can just find a vulnerability in one of those, you could have your penis enlargement ad all over the internet by hiring some botnets from Russia to go and hack all the sites, but you could have it up in 24 hours. Whereas if you have something that's coded in-house, then no one's going to have the incentive to try and hack it, because your vulnerabilities are not going to be standard. They're going to be very particular to your system. So using frameworks, even when there's a good reason, is also risky. And this idea that you're just going to put something up, it gives an illusion of progress. If you're an entrepreneur, you're motivated to think in this way, that, hey, okay, today I got a programmer. Excellent, that's progress. Now, okay, 2 weeks have gone by. Look at that, we got a page. It looks like shit, works like shit. No problem, I'm going to get on the phone with them. But that's still progress. So you'd be tempted to think that this is just progress as usual and nothing is perfect, that Rome wasn't built in a day, but yet that's not the entire story, because there are big problems that you're going to end up facing by choosing frameworks. And spoiler alert, I'll come to it, but basically with frameworks, it's easier to put up something standard. And by standard, I mean so standard that I cannot think of one application where you could just use that without any changes and be out and look professional. I just can't think of any example. Then if you add some particular thing to it, if you say, well, but I want a login, or, well, I want the login to have an extra box, an extra field, or you say, well, I want this field to come from my other database. Whoa, now you're in deep fucking trouble. To tell you the truth, when I was setting up the KMAU website, because this is like my 16th project, so it has a very low level of priority, I said, well, fuck it, for this time, I'm just going to fucking use WordPress. I'm going to change the login and add a couple lines of code so that it's not standard, doesn't get hacked, at least not from the login page. And that's it. And I put it up, and it looked like shit. And then a week went by, and a month went by, and in the end, I just couldn't stand it anymore. I was trying to upload videos, and just the format was wrong, the spacing was wrong. This thing just looked like, holy shit, like who do you want to teach about doing business if you get a website like that? And there's no amount of changing themes, changing plugins, and customization, and tweaking the options that made it look like a website. And mind you, now you might be listening to this 10 years in the future, and the website is fucking virtual reality and it's coming at you in 3D. And I don't know that. But the way it is now, and we're at the beginning of 2017, it's very, very basic. Very, very basic. It's got a list of links and kind of fancy, but really, really simple HTML layout. The idea there is I want to transmit information. I want to be able to do it easily. But to do that, and it's not looking nice, but it's looking clean. I have control over the spacing. I know how much information is coming through the screen at people that are opening it. Just to have like a scratch pad that has a modicum of organization and ease of uploading content, where I don't need to lay out everything in Word every single time and just paste in the text. But to do that, I had to completely move away from WordPress. So I coded it from scratch. It's not a big site. It's a really small thing. There isn't even a login. But, even something simple like that, there was no framework that was good enough. I was determined in the beginning to say, well, this time I'm not going to program my fucking website, because then I know I'm going to have to code a login after a while, and then I need the database, and I don't have time for this shit. But I tried a bunch of them. I don't even remember the names, but I tried like 5 or 6. Each one had installation problems. I installed all of them in the end. I got them to run, and then they were shit. So you're the entrepreneur, do whatever you want, but if you listen to me, I wouldn't use any framework for no reason whatsoever, except there's one exception, and one only. If all you need to do is have some piece of shit up so that you can talk to an investor and tell him, hey, we got a site, and then get the money, and then after you're just going to kick WordPress in the ass and pay somebody $20,000 to make a nice website. Then, okay, use WordPress. And, the risk that this guy's going to look at what you've done and say, well, what is this crap? You're not getting my money. Well, that's your risk. But at least, that way would be justifiable. Say, I don't want to begin something that I don't even have the budget, which is going to need to be recreated anyway. I just want to have some info or a mock-up. It doesn't even work, but just the idea. Okay? So that's one case in which I would make an exemption. I would make an exception. Sorry, it's my 17th hour of working here. But I'll make an exception and say, all right, use WordPress. But certainly, even when I was doing freelance programming for a living, I didn't let anybody use WordPress. Literally, if they were saying, I'll give you $3,000, but use WordPress, I said, no, don't do it. I don't do it. I don't take that job. Because I don't want to be here 6 months from now with you telling me to go into the fucking templates of WordPress and move that button to the right. Because the way they figured this thing, it's coming from one PHP, and there's no way to move it to the right until I fucking rewrite their code, which somebody else wrote, and the PHP files are all over the place instead of just using a class. And anyway, don't even get me started on it. You can see that I'm really against frameworks. Let's move on. The main problem that you're going to face is this, that if you start any kind of business at all today, you need some technology. I don't care if you're selling shoes, you need a shoe selling site. And maybe you're selling customizable shoes. So now you need a custom box where you tell, what kind of color sole do you want, or what kind of size do you want. And these are all things that depend a lot on your type of business. Now, let alone if you're trying to spice it up and have some unique identity, then your thing is even more particular. So there's no kind of business today that doesn't require some kind of internet presence. Hey, if you're an escort, you need some internet presence. So the problem is that if you were to learn programming by yourself, it's a huge waste of time. Huge waste of time. If you tell me, I already program in C and I want to get up to speed on PHP and I've never done databases, that's already a challenge. Because it's time. It's not really hard, but it's time. And figuring out what kind of shit doesn't work. And all these things, these technologies, these servers, they all have their fucking quirks. And until you get through these quirks for a few times, they will stomp you for hours or days. Like, for example, you can install PHP, and then you go and write something in PHP by opening the triangular brackets and then writing a question mark. That's the code, how you begin the PHP code. And there's a switch, though, in the initialization file, which prohibits you from using that code. And so, hey, I got my script, but nothing appears on the script. On the web page when I open it. That's because you used the wrong kind of brackets, because the initialization thing in the init file wasn't set, and the browser didn't give you any error, because there's another thing that you need to go and figure out if you really want to get the error displayed. There's two things. First of all, you need to set the level of error reporting, which could be set at 0. That depends on your host. So whichever host you use, which server space you get, they might have a different default init file. Sometimes you can't change it. Sometimes you need to write to them and ask, can you please change it? Because they won't let you change it because it's a shared server. But some other times you just have your own script that you can go and, not the script, but I mean the init file that you can go and edit. So long story short, when you're just starting out creating your first test page, before you even get it running, you might have to go through hours and hours, sometimes days of going online and asking for advice until finally they tell you, just paste this thing in this file and read the fucking manual. And then finally you paste the thing and all of a sudden now it's showing you the error, okay? So point is, even if you're an experienced programmer in another platform and you switch to some particular web technology that you chose, there are quirks. There's quirks in Apache web server, there are quirks in PHP, there are quirks all over the place, which you need to become familiar with, or at least go through once until it works, provided you don't change server after the fact. And so it takes time. So it's a huge waste of time. This is time that you're not entrepreneuring, but it's time that you're programming. You don't get paid for programming if you're an entrepreneur. But on the other hand, what's the other option? To find somebody to do the technology for you. And this is a very, very difficult proposition, even more than learning programming, for two reasons. If you want a technical co-founder, which is your best bet, let's say you find somebody who's trustworthy, they're honest, you get along well, and they have mad technical skills, and all of a sudden they take interest in your project. Really? How about you meet a 10.5 on the street, and she says, excuse me, can you help me take out my panties? I'm sweating. These are the kind of fantasies of porn movies, of B-grade porn movies. Thing is, people who have technical skills, nearly none of them are entrepreneurs for the reasons that I go over in my Psychology 101 lessons. And that is that they fall into the engineer's trap. They can easily make 10 grand a month prostituting themselves to Google or Facebook. And so, you know, they like that money. They like to spend it. They like to have it disposable, come in every month. They don't like taking risks. They have no incentive to take risks. And if they were to take risks, why would they take risks with you? Because of all the people that I've met in my very long career who are looking for a technical co-founder or who are looking for some programmer dude, there isn't one who had successful businesses behind. They're all noobs. And if you're a noob, no problem. You got to start somewhere, but realize that you talk to somebody and they have skills. They probably heard things from 100 people like you, and they're now used to the fact that most of them will go ahead and do nothing. You know, a technical person is in a very risky position starting a business with someone. And I got burned many, many times until finally I realized I'm never going to be a technical co-founder for anybody. I got burned many, many times because they have to put out all the effort initially. Your job begins when the stupid website is completed. But until it gets completed, it's all their risk. And if even they had sort of like an inkling of a desire to be entrepreneurial and to say, yeah, okay, I'm going to make the technology and then somebody else can go out and sell it. Even if you do find that kind of rare guy, they're going to have been burned so many fucking times by idiots who made them work for 6 months or 12 months. And then finally, this thing is perfect, it's complete. And then what do? Nothing. No advertisement. No money goes in it. Nothing. And these guys are naive because they're programmers. Like I was naive. So, you know, they don't have clearly defined, they don't even have a company set up. There's no vesting schedule. There's nothing. So they just lost their time. Okay? Which, if they work at Google, could have been hundreds of thousands of dollars. So it's really, really, really hard to find a technical co-founder if you're an entrepreneur. It's almost impossible. I would say don't waste your time with it unless you know that for some reason you've got something so cool, so exciting, you're so well connected, and you're so good at talking that you can cajole one into joining your thing, or unless you can pay them. If you can tell them, look, I give you the 10 grands that Google's giving you, but you also have 50% of the company. Now, maybe 1 out of 10 will listen to you. But, you know, most people that are starting out don't have the money to pay salaries. Now you can solve that easily by going to investors. However, then the investor is going to ask you, okay, well, do you have a prototype? Do you have anything? No. You just show up with an idea. Are you crazy? Do you know how many people with completed websites I have knocking at my door asking for my money? And why would I give money to you? You haven't even proven that you can find somebody to make a fucking website. So you see how difficult the situation is, and you end up running around and trying to convince people to do shit where it's a chicken or egg problem, and you haven't started, you get nothing yet because you don't have your site. So what can you do? Nothing. So because of all this shit, what's the solution that people use? India. Okay, hello, sir. And you tell them, I would like a dynamic website. Yes, no problem, sir. Wait, let me finish. And I would like it to hook up directly with PayPal. Yes, no problem, many times. Okay. And also wanted to connect with FedEx and UPS so that we can have a tracking notification. Oh, yes, no problem, sir. Then it costs $27. And you're like, wow, that's cheap. Fuck, I can get this done for $27. But can you also perhaps give me a 3-page website just with my business card? Yes, no problem, sir, but it's $29. So you say, okay, let me get $29. Transfer $29. 3 months later, you're like, hello, Abu, where's my website? Hello, sir, sorry, still working on it. And okay, well, it's my Indian accent. But they will string you along and they will fuck you so fucking hard that by the end of your experience with India and with getting shit done for $300 or however much the real amount would be, probably not 29, but like say, $300, $3,000, even that is a bargain. But you won't get anything done with that. They're just gonna be fixing and fixing and fixing, and at the end you're gonna finally get to the point where everybody was when I was freelancing, and I always intervened at times when other people were fucking up. And I told them, a website is 10K. It's not 3K. If you want to pay 3K and get fucked over, keep doing it. But it's difficult and it takes a lot of time for the guy to talk to you and to understand what the fuck you want and to actually do it right. And so they're expensive. So, okay, so this is the sort of the 3 options. You can either beg and waste years trying to beg somebody until you find an investor that can give you the money without the technology, or a technologist that's going to give you the technology without the money. Or you can find a freelance to fuck you really, really hard. Or you can sink a lot of money, maybe, I don't know, it depends what you're trying to do, but 5K, 10K. If you get less than 5K, people that are skilled don't necessarily want to talk to you. What they're going to say is, no problem. Let me give you a nice price. What do you want, 3K? No problem, I'll give you 3K. You know what they give you for 3K is fucking WordPress, which they set up in 5 minutes, and a design that they downloaded from some template. And they work 5 minutes, and they charge you 3K. I know people who do this. And then when you want to change it and say, I just want to add a button. No, now you're in trouble because they use a framework. So what is the solution? It's only because of these things, because of all these difficulties that I say, listen, it's going to be really difficult anyway. So do yourself a favor and learn some fucking programming. Because it doesn't matter if it takes you a year, because that's a year that you've gained a good thing that's going to help you out. It's not a year that you're going around kissing people's asses and trying to get money, and in the end, maybe you don't even get it. That's something that gives you also some degree of control over your company. So it's invaluable. But I don't think you should go out and become a programmer, because to do that takes even longer, and you get to the point where really you're not going to do it yourself anyway, or you could do it yourself. I mean, to a certain extent, it depends on you, right? So I can only give generalizations here because I don't know your particular case. But supposing that you do want to learn some programming, okay, then that's why I started putting together this course. Now, let's suppose that you know absolutely nothing about how any of this shit works. What's inside an app? I don't know, some app shit, like Joe Rogan would say. There are basically 2 things that you're gonna want to do if you're creating a technology-based business, or even a non-technological business that has to use technology. So you can either be looking at making an app or making a web app / website. Now everybody's talking about apps. Why don't you make an app? I told them, I'm solving a problem in science with 7 patents, and But why don't you just make an app and make it $200,000 in 5 days like Jack Smith? Everybody's trying to make an app. Everybody who loses his job or has a financial setback, they're making an app, trying to get lucky, get something for nothing. It's like the lottery of the modern day. Instead of buying the state lottery, people ride the app. You know how many fucking apps there are? Anyway, I have to avoid ranting. Let's just stick with people who have some modicum of worth and enthusiasm for actually producing things, and tailor my message to those instead of going on tangents. So if you do need to make an app, and you got a really good reason to make this fucking app, not just that, hey, I'm going to make an app and get lucky, then you should know about an app that it runs on a mobile, but outside of a browser. That's a big difference between a web app slash website and a real app. The app runs outside of the browser. This gives it some advantages and disadvantages. Many businesses have both. Because the more shit you can throw at the client to keep near him or to install on his devices, the bigger the presence you can have in their life, and the better you are. Because maybe he forgets all about your website, but then he goes on his phone and says, oh, look, he's sitting on the toilet. Look, what's this colored icon again? He clicks it. That's your website. That's what I was. And he starts browsing. You never know. But the main advantage with apps is that they're more responsive, and there's a reason for that we'll get into. And most of the computing happens on the mobile device itself. What does that mean, that it's more responsive? It means you can make something that's pretty cool. Like if you have some kind of picture editing application and you make it into an app, it could be very responsive, and you can slide it with your finger, and people like to fuck around with it and play with it because their time is worth jack shit nothing. So they have some incentive to use it because it's an app. It's more fun. On the browser, with a web app or website, you click something and nothing happens. There's no movement. There's no fancy user interface movement. And then you wait 2 seconds, and then something comes up, and then you click again. So it doesn't have the same appeal that apps have. Now, in a mobile app, often there's a database. That's the same as in a web app. But in a web app, the database is nearly always on the server side, which is the PC where you keep your code. Whereas in the mobile, if you have some application that doesn't really need to use a server, it could be a good idea to have it stored on the phone itself. You could have a little database on the phone. So like if it's a contact management application, you could save the contacts on the phone. That way when they click something, instead of taking 2 seconds for whatever info to appear, it comes up straight away because it doesn't have to go through the network. But even a web app is nearly always going to connect to the internet because there's login. You want people to log in. I mean, if you just create an app that people can use without going through your website, you sort of lose this kind of linkage that you have to your users, because they can just use it and never log in. You don't know anything about them. You can't monitor their activity or push other shit on them. And so most apps are connected to your account somewhere, whether it's connect with your Facebook account or login, register, that crap. And some other apps have even more interaction with the server, like Google Maps connects to Google servers to retrieve map information. Doesn't download the whole fucking world in one go, but it looks at where you are and downloads that data from Google. So it keeps connecting to the server again. Now, every platform for mobiles requires different code, and that's a huge problem. And Microsoft mobiles use a shitty version of Windows. Android uses Java for Android, which is really not really Java, because most of what you do on Android is more specific to the Android environment than to the language of Java itself. So the things that you do on Android, like having a notification on the main screen, or having timers, or receiving an SMS message, or downloading some stuff in the background. That's all stuff that's not, you're writing it in Java, but it's like a language. So like if you're speaking in English and you're reading Shakespeare, That's got more to do with Shakespeare than with the English language. And in the same way, if you're programming for Android using Java, which is what nearly everybody uses, you don't just need a Java programmer. You don't just need to know Java. You need to know Java, maybe 20%, and 80%. You need to know the stupid, shitty ways in which the Android platform is set up and how they thought up the user interface and so on and so forth. Like, just to give an example, Android does not have applications. It has activities, which just means a little page of an application. And you don't have access to the memory because whenever the guy swipes or closes the window, you lose your application. And so you don't have even like variables in the memory that you can keep running, because you risk having your whole state lost when the activity goes in the background or is terminated. So it's a kind of different programming infrastructure from Java itself. If you were to code, for example, in Java on a PC, you would have memory space that is persistent as long as the application is open. But with Android, you're going to have an uphill battle with all of the things that they decided to do in really crazy ways. Sometimes justifiable because it's a mobile platform, but sometimes just because they're idiots. And it's really crazy. So then you need somebody there for that platform that can code Android. You won't find many people who are really good both at Android and at, for example, Apple. Apple is another platform. They have their own programming language. I think it's Objective-C, which again is not C#, is not C++, is not C. It's Objective-C. And it's not used in much else really, other than for Apple devices. And the user interface, the way that it's structured, is one of the main incompatibilities. And that's why these things, they all necessarily need to be very different, because, one is based on some type of dialog window, and the other one, this is less so today that user interface components have become slightly standardized, but still there are things that just work differently. And so these languages are different. Now, there are platforms such as Mono, which then became Xamarin. I don't know how you read that, Xamarin, which were done in a way that, initially they were buggy as fuck. Now they're better than you would expect, but still shit, that allow you to write one single code base and repurpose for every device. So you could write an app that then works on Android, works on Windows, it works on... and it seems like a good idea, right? Except it can't work because the user interface is just too different and the screen sizes are too different. Let me just give you an analogy. When you code for Android, and Android is just one single platform, same programming language, same everything. But you could run an app on a small mobile or on a pad, or on a tablet. And when you do this, you find that a lot of the difficulty that goes into the programming language in trying to make everything so that it resizes automatically and uses the space in the most intelligent way possible. And that's why you don't tell it where you want to put something on the screen. In pixels, no, you give it in DP or device-independent pixels, which makes no sense. Huge fucking headache. Huge fucking headache. But when you really come to the point where that shit would be useful, that is, I want my app to look good on a mobile that has a small screen and a tablet that has a fairly big screen, that shit fails completely. So that's when they tell you, just make two different activities, which just means write it from scratch for two different types of devices. So the whole thing was bullshit to begin with. All right, fine. So this is within one platform. Now imagine somebody who's trying to do the same job across platforms. And the idea that you're going to write one code base and it's going to work on everything can't work. The UI, user interface, is too difficult. There's a solution, partially, which is to take all of the computing code, and it's going to work if you're doing some complex app, really, mostly. If you're doing something simple that's only basically user interface and pulling shit from the database, this might not help you very much. But let's say you're creating some photo manipulation app. So in that case, you have a lot of graphical processing that you don't necessarily want to rewrite in Java and C# and Objective-C because it's always the same shit. So you could take that stuff, whatever graphical filters or 3D processing of images, whatever you're doing with them, and take that and put it in a common code base for which you could use Xamarin. so that now it's device independent. And if you're lucky and you don't run into things that are still incompatible, like sockets, if you don't know what it is, doesn't matter, but there are things that are still incompatible where when you get down to it, hey, this wonderful platform, which costs thousands of dollars, which is supposed to allow you to repurpose code for many different platforms, now you find out that the one thing you wanted to do is still unsupported because the operating system responds differently. So, it's a contraption. This ties back into what I'm saying with frameworks. You get into a rabbit hole where now you got to go on the forums and you got to figure out why is it not working. And then when you ask the question, instead of having a million people answering you, because it's fucking PHP and the question is answered somewhere, there's a small community of people who paid $2,000 to get the Xamarin, and then now you got to wait for tech support. So there isn't one easy way, but I'm just covering a landscape here, and these are all things that you're going to need to consider when you build any of these things. You decide to build an app, the first thing is going to come out is, yeah, of course I want it to work on iOS and OS X, and I want it to run on Android. And then when you talk to the developer, you're going to be notified that they're completely different. But then it's going to say, no worries, because I can use Xamarin. And, well, when you get a sample, you figure out, well, the user interface kind of sucks on this thing. It's not exactly the same as you would expect from a native Android application, and so on and so forth. So my suggestion here is, if you've got some part of your code that does not result in user interface, and especially if that's substantial of a portion of your code, then take that and code it with some cross-platform thing. And then the rest you can really create an app on native language for each hardware, and that's simpler. See, it's easy to hire freelancers to say, yeah, I want an input box here and I want a menu there, and it's got to be this color, and then when they click this, you call this function which I'm giving you. That's easy. So the more you can compartmentalize the tasks, the easier it is to find somebody who can actually do it. There's another design choice here, though, because as long as I go into threads, I'd like to be complete about them. And the idea that I just gave you to say, well, let's put all the difficult code in Xamarin and then have it run on multiple devices, you could really push that to the server, which carries some implications that might be useful on a business side. This is really where being an entrepreneur who knows the technology, you can have some huge leverage or advantage in the market, because you can use quirks to your advantage. Just like if you know banking regulations very well, you can use those quirks to your advantage, right? Or tax code quirks. If you know technical quirks, you can use those to your advantage. Like suppose that there's some really complicated graphical processing, just put it on the server. At this point, you're going to get a lot of traffic coming in, people uploading their images, but traffic is cheaper and cheaper nowadays. And the benefit there would be that you can keep the code completely private so that it's executing on your central servers. And then the resulting pictures is then downloaded by the app. And this really allows you to have a real single code base, because it's just some either Java servlet or whatever fucking thing that you've got running centrally. And it also makes it obscure to people trying to copy what kind of processing you're doing. And there's also a lot of traffic coming in, and you can justify the price of the app, saying this is an app runs on neural networks, and it's really difficult, and your phone is not powerful enough to do this kind of really cool shit. So that's why you need to pay $9.99 a month, because whenever you push the button and the thing gets uploaded, there's like 100 computers in the cloud that are processing your image. I mean, I'm exaggerating here, but you can spin it like that. So not necessarily do you need to have all the code running on all devices, but you could take part of the code and have it run centrally. And when you do that, you're using an architecture that's called thin client, meaning that the client, the app that people are using, is simply a thin thing that doesn't do much, that connects to the central server for most purposes. But the interface is still going to be fast if it's an app, because when you're clicking, you're swiping, changing the settings, it's still very responsive. Just when you're doing the main processing, that could connect centrally. So I hope I've kind of opened your eyes on the complexity of all the choices that then affect how your business runs. So if you just go to somebody and you're an entrepreneur and let's say you want to do a photo editing app and you don't know any of this because you didn't listen to this video, you're in the shit because you depend on some idiot who's got no business background, who wants you to make some shit and some technology because he wants to program with it because it's fun. And what about your customers? What about your leverage? What about what are you going to tell people? How are you going to justify the prices? All of this, you're not in control of that. So you see how, even if you don't become a programmer, but if you have the basic fundamentals of programming and platforms, can mix these different components to your advantage, you're in a far, far better position than if you can't. Now, I want to wrap up this mobile app section, get to the web apps section, and then wrap up this first lesson. The question that you have to ask yourself is, do you really need a mobile app? Because I see a lot of people who don't really fucking need one, that just want to have one because everybody's got one. Mobile apps are harder to code and maintain because of all the quirks with Android and with having advanced interfaces that mobile devices have and the memory requirements and all of that. They're harder to maintain, much harder to write, to debug. There are problems with portability, as I've mentioned, because of having different platforms. The only advantage really is that people like to download them and fuck around with them, and if they do, then now you've got a fixed presence on their phone. But you could also have an app that just opens a browser within the app that looks like it's not a browser, but it's a browser, and inside the browser is a web app. So the choices are really very numerous. But exactly what you need to give to the client depends on what you want them to feel, think, and do. And so you have to think about who they are. You have to know them in depth. And that is marketing. And that's why I always say marketing comes first. The creation of the product is the first and biggest piece of the marketing. Because if you think that if this thing is even slightly slow, like it's not a toy anymore, people are not going to want to fuck around with it, that you're going to have a massive penalty, then automatically you know you're restricted to having a solid web app. On the other hand, if you think, it's scientists using this, they're used to fucking MATLAB, and they can wait half an hour for the image to get processed. Or there's money going into this thing. You get a financial application, and employees are going to use it, and they're getting paid to use this. And the decision to buy it is going to be made by a guy who's just got the bottom line in mind. And your software makes money. At that point, the interface is not important at all. So if you get nothing else from this video, then understand that these choices have to be made according to the client, because that's where the money comes from. They should not be made by an entrepreneur who knows nothing about the background, nothing about the platforms, nothing about the languages. And less than that, all the more they shouldn't be made by some freelancer that just wants to use fucking Angular because he likes the name and it's new and he wants to tell his buddies, hey, I made an application in Angular and they paid me $3,000. That's not what needs to happen, because otherwise you're fucking naive. Just get a job and don't waste your time and don't waste your uncle's money. This is not for children. Anyway, so that's what I have to say as a basic overview of applications running on mobiles. Now, as far as web applications work, the difference is that they run in a browser. That doesn't mean just on a PC browser, also in a mobile browser. But as you know, they feel very different when you open a website versus when you open an app. The modern web apps use a mix of JavaScript, HTML5, and CSS. And there are many frameworks for the user interface, some at higher level than others. Now, every time that the user clicks something, the browser sends a message to the server which returns something. And that's the reason why, like if you're using Facebook inside your phone through a browser and you click posts, it takes a while before they come out. And if you're okay with Mark Zuckerberg fucking your grandmother and cutting her to pieces with a chainsaw and putting her into a suitcase and sending her to you, like it says on the terms of service, I'm sure it says that somewhere, with all the things that they want access to and they want you to sign away, then you can just download the app that they try to push on you so very intensely. But otherwise, if you just use the browser, it's kind of a pain. It's an inferior interface. Now that said, things are converging with HTML5 and all of that to the point where I think at some point the things will be nearly indistinguishable, but we're not there yet. But a web app has one fundamental advantage, which is you just need to code it once. There's no problem with compatibility, because it doesn't matter what browser you use, what platform you use, it runs the same. You get it working once and then it stays working. And there's no like lollipop, fucking dildo lollipop Android version 20 update that breaks it and now you need to hire the guy or track him down in Thailand so that you can change the way you were accessing the webcam because now it's not working anymore. And so it's completely cross-platform. So this is how web apps, websites work. Now, I would like to close with the main point here that you have to keep in mind is that as I began the lesson by stating, your advantage here is speed. You don't know what the customer wants because you're not an established business. And so you might be on the market with some, to follow our example, a photo manipulation app. And then when you put it on the market, you notice that nobody's even changing their pics. They're just posting them. And so you need to say, all right, no problem, let's pull it. We're no longer doing any kind of processing on the fucking pictures. This is now a photo upload website. And then you notice that they're not just uploading random pictures, but they're uploading pictures of when they take a shit. And so you capitalize on that. Because you're an entrepreneur, you got to be able to capitalize on anything. So now is a third sharing.com. So now you're segmenting your audience and you're appealing more by appealing to a smaller segment. But you need to be able to change these things very, very quickly. So you need to be able to call somebody up, and if they're not available, find a replacement extremely quickly to say, listen, we've got 48 hours. They are reviewing us on the Washington Post, and they deal with shit all the time. And so now we need to change this from share your pic to share your crap. And so we need to change it, change the user interface, make the color brown. And this has to happen immediately. And you need to be able to get this done cheaply and as soon as possible. And to do that, you need to have made the right choices to begin with. And if you have learned a little bit of programming where you can go in and open this stuff and say, okay, this is how he did it. But even better than that is like, while the guy is programming this, you go into the code, you wouldn't be able to write it yourself, but you're looking at what functions he's using, and you're noticing, okay, so he's using this, this is how he's doing things. And then you can think from a business perspective, I don't think this is scalable, for example. It looks like every time that they, that they open the app, it's logging them in. So that's a server call every time the app opens. Whereas you could tell the guy, listen, I wouldn't want you to do it like that. Store a file on the mobile so that they log in once, and then make that like a cookie that expires after 30 days. Now all of a sudden you've lowered your server hits by 5 times or 10 times. It might not be a big consideration when you're starting out, but in a different context, it might be quite important. There are many things a programmer can do which don't scale. And so I think that learning even just a little bit about how this shit works enables you to choose the right platform, avoid common pitfalls, and maybe once you start talking to a programmer and he sees that you're not a complete moron and you kind of speak his language, he might be even more motivated to work with you because he knows that when you're asking him to do something and he replies to you, no, that can't be done because you're not going to be the idiot dude that says, no, I want it done anyway. And just knowing that somebody is on the same wavelength as them, I really think that when you outsource projects to programmers, if you're a programmer yourself, you can sometimes get it to work. The big problem is when you're not a programmer yourself, because there are so many ways to do things. It's like if you build a house and you don't know how to build a house, and you have no fucking idea. How about the electricity? I don't know how that shit works. Did they do it right? I don't know. What happens when I got 40 people living in this hotel? What's going to happen then? Will I have to redo it? Actually, it's quite fitting, this analogy of wiring up a building. What if they use shitty windows? This thing going to break? And so, if you just study even just a little bit, you don't become an architect, but at least you know, look, when they do the electricity, you got to look at this and that and the other thing. I can't come up with an analogy because I got no fucking idea how a building works, but I think you get the point. Let's see, this has now lasted 54 minutes, so I think it's a good, solid first lesson for programming for entrepreneurs. I know that I've covered a lot of material, but this was meant to be a sort of map. A map that shows you what kind of territory you're going to be navigating. And so I've shown you, here's the ocean, this is a mountain, this is a river. This is not meant for you to now know everything that I've said. We'll probably cover it in detail in other lessons. But this is what you have to deal with. At least you know what's in it and what kind of degree of complexity you're facing. And I've perhaps managed to even convince you that if you know a little bit about technology, you're in a much better position than the, like the finance dude that starts a tech company and he's got no fucking idea how the whole thing is working. You don't want to be powerless and clueless, because that's not how you outcompete hundreds of thousands of other people trying to do most likely kind of the same things. All right, let me know if this was useful or if there's anything that you want me to cover in the next lesson, or if there's anything in the delivery style that has confused you and you would like, you can recommend a way to present it better. Thanks for listening, and I don't even know if I'm gonna keep up with this tattoo it on your vagina bullshit. I need to come up with something else. Cheers.